Alright guys, we're going to start trigonometry. Now we actually get to use our calculators. So you don't need anything fancy, just something with those buttons that look like sin, cos, and tan. But that is not what they are called. It is the sine, cosine, and tangent. Alright, these are functions, trigonometric functions. They do something to the value, sort of like addition, subtraction, multiply, divide. But we're going to use that comparison later on to help you with the inverse functions. But these sines, cosines, and tangents, all right, they're various functions that we're not getting into now. We're just going to work on their ratios. We have trig ratios. And they all deal with right triangles. Okay, we'll have trig ratios with right triangles. What that means is if we have a right triangle here, and let's call this angle theta, just Greek letter theta, okay? We find the sine of an angle, or the cosine of an angle, or the tangent of an angle. All right, so we find the trig function of an angle. So it may look like the sine of theta equals, okay? The ratio, I wish there was a more detailed way to do it, but the best way to think about it, and everybody uses it, it's the easiest way, is called SOHCAHTOA. All right? So I'm going to erase this up here, because you're going to have to memorize this. So, okay. And this SOHCAHTOA is just a way to know how to set up your ratios. So let's go back to that right triangle we had. We have theta over right angle. The SO part is going to be the sine. All right? The sine of theta, of the angle that it's given, it could be theta, it could be this angle here, right, is going to be the opposite side over the hypotenuse. Opposite over hypotenuse. Well, let's look at theta. Which side is opposite? Well, here's opposite. What is the hypotenuse? There's only one hypotenuse in a right triangle. Hypotenuse. Okay? So now let's put some values here. Let's say A, B, C. So we'll call this lowercase c, lower a, lower b. So the sine of theta is the opposite side over the hypotenuse. So the opposite side is A, and the hypotenuse is C. Okay. Next we're going to do the cosine, SOHCAHTOA. The cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse. So I have the cosine of theta equals. Well, here's theta. Which side is adjacent to theta? Wait a minute. I have two sides that are adjacent to theta. This side here and this side here are both adjacent to theta. How do I tell the difference? Yep, we already labeled this hypotenuse. So if that's already labeled hypotenuse, it's not going to be all hypotenuse and adjacent. So the hypotenuse is always the hypotenuse. We can identify the hypotenuse as the longest leg across from the right angle. So if that's the hypotenuse, this is adjacent. So therefore, the cosine of theta is the adjacent B over the hypotenuse C. Okay? I'd say questions, but if you do, type it up in the comments and I'll answer it for you. And next we have tangent. The tangent of theta is the opposite over adjacent. So this opposite of theta is A, and the adjacent is B. Those are my trig ratios. SOHCAHTOA. The sine is the opposite over the hypotenuse, the cosine is the adjacent over the hypotenuse, and the tangent is the opposite over the adjacent. This is just a basic intro lesson on trigonometric functions. I don't think it's all that difficult. Play around with it, make some random triangles. I can give you one here to try on your own. Or go into your notes packet and try that as well. Let's call this, let's give it numbers. 5, 12, 13, and this will be theta. And with the sine of theta, cosine of theta, tangent of theta. Take a second, pause the video, complete it, come back, and I'll have the answers for you. Pause. Welcome back, children. Let's look at the sine of theta. Remember, the sine is the opposite. I like to maybe identify everything first before I go through it. Well, the hypotenuse is the easiest one to identify. What is opposite of theta? The 12 is opposite of theta. And all we have left is 5 to be adjacent, and we see it's the side next to theta that is not the hypotenuse. So the sine of theta will be the opposite 12 over the hypotenuse 13. The cosine of theta is the adjacent 5 over the hypotenuse 13. And the tangent of theta is the opposite over the adjacent, 12 over 5. Again, SOHCAHTOA. I've seen it written like this. This may or may not help you. All right, Joe, man. This may or may not help you, but I've seen people go sine is opposite the hypotenuse. Cosine is adjacent over hypotenuse. TOA. SOHCAHTOA. That looks like a cool decal you could put on your first car, right? Us cool geometry people like that. All right, guys. This is our intro on trigonometric functions. Hopefully this helps you out. Next, we'll work on inverse and start messing around with the calculators. Thank you for your time.